you for tuning into the second episode of the MMA Roundtable. We got myself and Chris, the two hosts of the MMA Podcast, along with Ray and Patrick, the two hosts of MMA Mental. And we got a roundtable show. We're going to break down UFC on Fuel 5, Stefan Struve versus Stipe Miocic. Really great 6 fights to talk about there, a couple of segments to bring you. So without any further ado, let's do it. And like I said, welcome to the second edition of the MMA Roundtable. Thank you so much for tuning in. If it wasn't for our listeners, we'd honestly have no reason to do this. Thanks to our partners, MMA Mental, we got Ray and Patrick on the line, and we air every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And without any further ado, I'll pass it off to Ray and let him plug MMAmental.com.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to let you know what we've got lined up this week. We've got something special this week. We've got first of all, we're opening the show with a UFC bantamweight. We're going to have on Mitch Gagnon, who's coming off his win over Willal Watson from a couple of weeks back. And then MMA Mental have teamed up with an MMA organisation in the UK. We've teamed up with the MMA Lockdown show. So we're going to be having their promoter on and some of their fighters. And they're obviously all up-and-coming fighters. They're all ones to watch. But I think what's going to make it interesting is we're going to be having the fighters on at the same time. So the guys that are fighting each other, we'll have them on the show and they can talk to. We'll be talking to them both at the same time about their fight, which I think will be quite interesting.
Definitely. And where can people tune in to MMA Mental?
Right, come and check us out. We're at www.mmamental.com, and we'll have all our podcasts up there.
Definitely follow them on Twitter too, MMA Mental. Follow us on Twitter, the MMA Podcast. We're a live podcast. We do it every Wednesday. Both of our podcasts actually drop on Wednesdays. MMA Mental isn't live, but each episode is released Wednesdays on iTunes, I believe.
That's correct,
and we are live Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I actually talked to both Michael Schiavello and Joey Diaz today. Both of them have priors this Wednesday, so we won't be having either of them on this week, even though we plan to have them on in the next couple weeks. Hopefully we can get MMA legend Renzo Gracie on this week. And if not, we know it's been a week or two since we've had a fighter on, so we'll try and find somebody to come on the show. And if you are listening live, we definitely encourage you to call in. Our number is 646-378-1046. You can tweet us at the MMA Podcast. And obviously visit our website, our websites, MMAmental.com, the MMApodcast.com. And yeah, the main thing we're planning on bringing you guys this week's UFC on Fuel 5. And actually Ray was there live. So before we get into the fights and whatnot, how was the atmosphere there, man?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, personally, I love going to watch the UFC live. It's always a buzz. The atmosphere was great. Obviously, there's a lot of UK guys fighting, so you had the interest, from the crowd. Obviously, Dan Hardy was fighting. It was his hometown. Obviously, there was a few results that didn't go the way we would have liked. So you kind of get the flat side to it. But the event was brilliant, and the crowd loved it. Dana White as well. He was spent about 25-30 minutes with the crowd. It was amazing.
How were your seats over there?
Yeah, because it's quite a small arena. I reckon I was about 20 feet away from the octagon. And I was raised up off the ground a little bit, so my view was perfect.
Wow. So you've obviously been to a handful of fights that have taken place in the UK. Where does UFC on Fuel 5 rank on that list?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, there were some great fights. I mean, I have been to some great events in the past, but it was certainly up there. It was one of the better events. It was. I mean, it's one of the ones which I'll go back and I've taped it and I'll rewatch some of the fights again. It was that kind of event. It was good enough to rewatch again.
That's awesome. Before we pass it off to Patrick and Chris to see how they're doing, I wanted to ask: is it legal to videotape fights from your seat? I've always wondered that.
No, it's illegal.
Oh wow! So they have people going around making sure folks aren't videotaping stuff with their phone?
They don't really go around and check it, but it's kind of known that if you do it, you can have your equipment confiscated. So it's not really worth risking, especially when all the fights are so easy to access online anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, and we got two other hosts, even though you wouldn't know it listening to the last 4 or 5 minutes. We got the co-host of MMA Mental, Patrick Johnson, who's joining us on minimal sleep. He's a trooper. What's up, bro?
Hey, minimal sleep, maximum energy. I'm psyched for the show, as always. Pleasure to be chatting with you, Josh, and I'm sorry, Jake and Ray and Chris. There's that lack of sleep coming in. And I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. What about you, Chris?
I'm doing good. Just going back to the whole thing, you and Ray talking about getting caught having filming equipment. The UFC has recently employed a infrared system where they can actually look out in the crowd and pinpoint people videotaping. I just made that up, but I thought it's a good idea.
That's an excellent idea. Actually, I used to work for the O'Connell Center, Florida Gator basketball, and one of the games my job was literally just walk around and look for people videotaping. So maybe they have a guy working undercover doing that like I did, probably a little bit more high-tech. If they actually use an infrared system, Chris, I'm labeling you a genius.
Thank you, man. It wouldn't be the first time I've been called that. My mommy tells me I'm the bestest little boy ever.
That's right. But, yeah, with all awkwardness aside there, let's move on to the fights. We had Che Mills versus Duane Ludwig. This was probably the most disappointing fight. There was a lot of action in the first couple minutes there. Mills started off with a pretty good takedown. I think for the majority of the fight, Mills was the better fighter, but unfortunately about halfway through the first round, they clinched up on the cage. Duane Ludwig goes down awkwardly and points at his left leg. Thankfully, Mills, being the gentleman he is, didn't rush in and start attacking. Ludwig points toward his leg. He blew out his knee, and it had to be stopped, TKO, via knee injury. What did you think of that fight, Ray, and what was the crowd's reaction to it?
Up to the point where we did have a fight, Mills was in control. It was pretty even on the feet, but Mills was able to get in and get the takedown, and that was effective. He was working from side control, so he looked pretty good. And then obviously when the fight stopped, you always get that confusion in the crowd when you get a fight stop and it's not an obvious stoppage. So you had a little bit of confusion. But it stood out for me how classy, like you just said, how classy Che was. Because as soon as Ludwig went down, I think Che could tell there was something wrong. Because obviously when he fell, he knew he hadn't caused him to fall. He hadn't took him down. He hadn't threw a punch. So the fall was unorthodox. And he looked at Ludwig, and Ludwig pointed to his knee. And Mills stopped fighting straight away. Didn't need the ref to jump in. And then he was just checking if he was all right. And it wasn't probably the win that Mills would have wanted or the way he would have wanted it, but I just loved the way how classy he was at the end of that fight.
Definitely. What did you think about that, Patrick?
I thought it started out really good. Just it started out like we thought it would. Maybe not as much action. It was still the early going of the first round and kind of in the feeling out process. It was definitely a surprise to see what had happened, and just a bad break for Duane Ludwig. He's a really exciting fighter, and he's been having some trouble with some injuries lately. And I haven't been able to pinpoint exactly where the injury came from, though. Rewatching that fight, as I watch it, I think they were kind of in the clinch, but those kind of things just happen, and like Ray and Jake, you both alluded to, the British gentleman, Che Mills, he certainly was very classy. He halted any further strikes, and he was really good. It looked like he had a genuine concern for Duane Ludwig, and it was a level of class that I love seeing in the octagon.
Chris?
Yeah, man, I actually didn't see the fight. I just saw the recap of it. I actually missed the entire event and had to go online and check the fights out, and that's actually one of the fights I didn't see. So I don't really have too much to say about it except, I hope Duane recovers and And Che Mills, like Patrick pointed out, is a consummate gentleman.
Definitely. I think, you probably won't see Ludwig get penalized too much, even though it technically was a loss. Losing this straight up to Mills, this was his third loss in a row. Before this, he lost fights to Josh Neer and Dan Hardy. We probably won't see him get cut from the UFC, but he's probably going to be on that chopping block for his next fight. Mills, on the other hand, 6-1 his last 7. His only loss, obviously, to Rory McDonald at UFC 145 earlier this year. Who all do you think would be a good matchup for Che Mills next? I like Dan Miller. What about you, Ray?
I don't think Dan Miller's a good matchup because I think stylistically they're not good, because Dan Miller is a grappler where Mills will struggle against grappler. I'd like to see him go up against another striker, and I wouldn't mind seeing him go up against Dan Hardy.
Wow, that'll be a big jump up an opponent from Duane Ludwig. What about you, Patrick?
Well, I think that's some good matchmaking on both your guys' parts. For Che, I think you got to step him up the ladder. The question is how far. There's a lot of good welterweight matchups coming up. Friday we have a UFC on FX5. That's got Mike Pierce versus Aaron Simpson, a good 170 scrap, and I don't know, maybe I could see him taking on the winner of that fight. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I personally would love my dream matchup, considering how awesome and technical Mills is, would be Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And I think he has a fight lined up as it is, but if Thompson wins his next fight impressively, I'd say he versus Mills would be a real barn burner.
Yeah, Mills is one of these guys, pretty good all around. He took Ludwig down, although he really wasn't able to keep him down at the beginning of that fight. Obviously, he has spectacular Muay Thai. So he's in that range of probably top 25, top 30 welterweights in the UFC. It's a really hard to gauge where he belongs because his only loss is to Rory McDonald, who I think everyone believes is in that top 10, going up against BJ Penn next. So we'll definitely see. Rory did stop him in the second round, but even Rory sort of, no one knows his exact stock in the welterweight division. So Ludwig, on the other hand, a guy who's been in the UFC for a while, and we'll see who both of those guys get matched up against next. Moving on, we had Jimmy Manuwa, the poster boy, taking on Kyle Kingsbury. I actually didn't have this on the original run sheet because we didn't break it down, but it was such an amazing fight. We had to mention it. Jimmy Manuwa beat Kyle Kingsbury down in the first round. I had it 10-8 Manuwa, easy. I mean, just had his way with him. And you don't see it in many fights, but this fight was honestly a testament to both guys. Both of their stocks went up, in my opinion, because after getting absolutely crushed in the first round, Kyle Kingsbury came back and won the second round, in my eyes, 10-9. Great fight, and unfortunately the doctors stopped it after the second round, as they should have, because Kyle Kingsbury's eye was swollen shut. I mean, he couldn't open it as hard as he tried, so the doctors came in there and stopped it, and I really think Poster Boy's got a bright future in the UFC. What did you think about that epic beatdown, Chris?
Well, like you said, Kyle Kingsbury got beaten from pillar to post. I mean, Jimmy Manuwa just had some just impressive flashes of brilliance in there, and Kyle Kingsbury isn't a guy to really give up, which, if you think about it, just puts more stock into Glover Teixeira, who beat down Kingsbury within, 2 minutes? So to see Jimmy Manuwa do that, and then Kyle Kingsbury probably shouldn't have kept on fighting after the first round. His eye was already swollen shut, but he came out there like a warrior, and eventually the doctors and refs had seen enough. So, like you said, the sky's the limit for Manuwa, and Kyle Kingsbury shouldn't lose any stock from this fight, considering he wasn't the one to tap out or get knocked out. It was the refs that called it, and he actually fought back with one eye for an entire round.
Yeah, Ray, what did you think about that?
This was one of my highlights of the card for me, because I spoke to Jimmy Manuwa quite a while back before he signed with the UFC, and this guy has been a massive prospect in the UK for a long time. and we've been talking about him, making the break. He actually turned the UFC down twice before he finally signed and he explained it to me that he wanted to make sure that when he went, the time was right for him. He didn't want to go, be out of his depth, and then leave the UFC. And he just felt that now it's time that he can come in and he can make an impact, basically. He come in against Kingsbury, and like you said, he destroyed him in that first round. Kingsbury shown a lot of heart, and like you said, it wasn't about Kingsbury not quitting. The ref should have stopped at the end of round 1 because Kingsbury was down and done. And I know he fought back in round 2. It seemed to me that every shot Manuwa landed looked like a knockout blow. And someone likened him to a bigger, stronger version of Paul Daly, which I thought was a good comparison because every punch, kick, knee he threw, it just looked like it was going to knock him out. I personally felt that this fight should have got fight of the night. The Struve Miocic fight was good, but I just thought this fight should have been fight of the night. 1, because of how impressive Manuwa looked, and 2, because Kingsbury, even though he was getting battered, he never ever stopped coming forward. Like I say, he made that second round a real contest, and I just thought, for those 2 rounds, I thought that was the best fight of the night.
Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic fight as well. I didn't know very much about Jimmy Manuwa coming into that fight. Some friends of mine who had seen him fight said that this is really a guy to look out for, and that he was probably going to stop Kingsbury by TKO, and that prediction kind of shocked me because, like we had talked about, Kingsbury, he's a very durable guy. He went the distance with Fabio Maldonado in just an insane war. I really have a hard time, besides the Glover Teixeira fight and, of course, this most recent fight, I have a hard time thinking of another time he's been stopped. And in the very beginning of the first round, Kingsbury did get a takedown on Manuwa, and Kingsbury, he's a gigantic, I think he's 6'4", 205, and I think Manuwa, he's 6'1", 6'2", so he had a big 205er, big American wrestler on top of him. He was able to manage his way out, so that looks good. And then from there, that was really the most success, at least round-wise, that Kingsbury had. And Manuwa, he just came out with some fantastic knees, great strikes, great punching, great boxing. It was a very, very good performance for him.
Yeah, and like I said before, I don't think you really can discredit either guy for that. We had, Manuwa, who obviously put it to Kingsbury, but you can't take too much away from Kingsbury. Even though he's lost 3 in a row, like Duane Ludwig, I doubt we'll see him get cut from the UFC. Jimmy Manuwa, on the other hand, 12-0, the guy fighting out of Lions Pride MMA in London. Next up for him, I would love to see him fight the winner of Thiago Alves and Stanislav Nedkov. Who would you like to see him matched up against, Chris?
Wow.
That can't be Thiago Alves, because Thiago Alves is
Silva, sorry.
Okay.
Holy shit, Thiago Alves is broken up? Hell yeah. It's about time. We all wanted that. Manuwa needs to have an opponent out there that is kind of tailor-made for him. He doesn't really need too high of a step up. Obviously, as Patrick pointed out, he wanted to have the right timing. Very measured fighter, obviously. So
I think it's about time we see him get tested.
You know what? I think Thiago Silva and Nedkov are both brawlers with really decent technique, so I'm co-signed on that. I can't really think of anyone out there at the moment that's building themselves up. Most guys in light heavyweight division have been there for a while, so I think that's a perfect test.
Ray?
I've got another opponent. At the minute, I think I want to see Manuwa built up. So obviously, you're giving people who have got a similar style to him and see how he fares. So I'd like to see him up against Joey Beltran. This is the guy that has only ever been stopped once in the UFC, which was obviously by LeVar Johnson. If Manuwa was to come in and stop Beltran, it would really show that this guy is going to be a serious contender, I think.
I think those are some good matchups, Ray, and Jake, Chris, you guys mentioned some real good ones too. For me, I would like to see Jimmy Manuwa perhaps against a James Tahuna. He's, I believe, on a 3-fight win streak right now at 205. He's another big 205er. I think that'd be an exciting fight. These guys are both just brawlers, real heavy hitters. I don't believe Tahuna has another fight announced. I could be incorrect about that. Or there's also another option. I think Glover Teixeira versus Jimmy Manuwa, I mean, it makes sense at least in the fact they're both 1-0 in the UFC. They both made their debut, TKO and Kyle Kingsbury, and no one wants to fight Glover Teixeira, which we'll get back to in the Bonehead Pick of the Week section. But so I think either of those would be good, and you guys also brought up a lot of great matchups as well.
Definitely. And I'm getting a little echo. I don't know whose volume is up a little bit, but yeah, I really agree with all that, and I think it'll be interesting. That was Manuwa's first fight in the UFC. He waited a little while before he joined the promotion, and I'm excited to see him fight some top tier 205-pounders. And moving down, we'll do one more before we do our Guess That Tweet segment. We had John Hathaway and John McGuire, both Brits, and McGuire didn't really have any answer for Hathaway. Hathaway, especially in the second and third round, just had his way with him. He really executed the single leg brilliantly, kept John McGuire down. Once John McGuire was on his back, he would be on his back the rest of the round. And even Dana White called it a snoozer, but Hathaway easily moves past John McGuire. P-Money?
You know, I kind of take issue with Dana White. Now, I don't know if it really was such a great fight, or perhaps just the hype of the whole card really got to me, because from the first Facebook fight all the way up to the very last fight on the main event, I thought all the fights were spectacular. McGuire versus Hathaway, it really did play out, I think, the way the majority of people thought it would. Hathaway, he's a fighter. He's gone to the decision, I believe, in at least his last 6 or 7 fights. So it was kind of predictable in that sense. And for me, John McGuire, he's a good fighter. He had a good record going in, 18-3. But I just felt that Hathaway, he had faced a little tougher competition. He was just a little bit more well-rounded, and I think that was pretty evident and on display. But as far as the fight itself, I don't think it was terribly boring.
Yeah, man, it wasn't boring per se, but it was frustrating for me, considering that John McGuire is a phenom on the ground, and John Hathaway dominated guys like Rick Story. He dominated Diego Sanchez. I just feel that he's kind of turning into the British version of John Fitch, where you know that if he really put the work in, he could finish guys. And it seems like he's not leagues ahead, but pretty well ahead of most of his opponents, and yet he doesn't finish the fights. I mean, he couldn't even fight who was that guy from the Ultimate Fighter 15? It was one of those guys who basically...
Chris McRae.
Huh?
Chris McRae.
Yes, Chris McRae. There we go. He fought Chris McRae and couldn't even finish McRae, man. I mean, that to me is frustrating. So as far as this fight went, it wasn't the worst fight ever. It was far from being the best fight ever. So I think Hathaway, nothing really happens to these guys' stock. I think that McGuire is going to go a slightly peg down, and I don't think John Hathaway shot himself into the upper echelon of the division with this kind of performance. He needs something a little bit better.
I like what Chris said there. I was thinking exactly that. He's the British John Fitch, not as good as John Fitch, but the same kind of style. I mean, obviously, I was in the arena for this. I was watching the fight live. I agree with Dana. I thought this wasn't a great fight. It wasn't enjoyable to watch. It went as I predicted. I've gone for Hathaway UD. I thought he would control him on the ground. He'd out-grapple him. But Hathaway is one of these guys. He wins. He's effective, but he's not exciting to watch. He looked pretty good against Pascal Kraus, actually. I'll give him that. But he has struggled. He didn't look good against Chris McRae, like you say. He seemed to have fallen a little bit after his loss to Mike Pyle. But, he won the fight. But it was one of them where who cares, I'm not going to come away from this event remembering this fight or remembering these fighters. It wasn't that great.
No, it really wasn't. But, a win here really moves Hathaway up into, I would say, the top 20, 25 in the UFC welterweights. He's 17-1. This was his 8th fight in the UFC, so he's 7-1 now, coming off wins against McRae, Kraus, McGuire. And McGuire is not a slouch either. I think he was on a 7 or 8 fight win streak before this. So Hathaway, kind of like I feel about Jimmy Poster Boy Manuwa, I think he he should be put up against somebody of decent caliber. I have two different potential matchups in my head. Speaking of in my head, I wouldn't mind to fight James Head, just beat Brian Ebersole last month, or I want to say the winner of Mike Pierce versus Aaron Simpson, but I'm afraid I might literally die of boredom if we see John Hathaway fight the winner of Pierce Simpson. So maybe James Head, maybe the winner of that Simpson-Pierce fight. Both of those would be pretty intriguing, and we'll finally see Hathaway match up against a really, really top-level wrestler who's on his I believe, his last 7 fights have been unanimous decisions, so his next fight we'll probably see more of the same. Patrick?
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with you. John Hathaway, he really seems to have his niche carved out. He's got his style, and it seems like, hey, if that's what's working for him, he's been very successful in UFC. Like you guys mentioned, his only losses to Mike Pyle. He's got wins over Diego Sanchez, and so as far as what I'd like to see next, I think James Head that'd be a very good style matchup. I think they're pretty similar, and James Head, he was very impressive, beating Brian Ebersole recently. So I think that's a solid matchup.
Yeah, that is a solid matchup. James Head seems like the kind of good litmus test. I was actually thinking of someone who would challenge him, kind of like Mike Pyle did, and someone who's on kind of a similar career path, and I would have to say Matt Brown. Matt Brown is expected to face Mike Swick. So if he gets past Swick, I think that's a fight, because we all know that Matt Brown brings it every time. Every time he steps in there, his opponents are in a fight. No one's going to skate by Matt Brown. So I feel like that would be the perfect test beyond James Head.
I'm going to pick an opponent that's already been mentioned, but was mentioned for another fighter, and it was an opponent that was mentioned for Che Mills. I think Dan Miller would be a good matchup. Yeah, Dan Miller's obviously got a good record at middleweight, good reputation, dropped down to welterweight, won his last fight, but I think he didn't look great in his win, but it was a good fight, but he just didn't look great because the guy he was fighting wasn't that great. But I think Dan Miller versus John Hathaway would be a good fight. Dan Miller, I think, is an exciting fighter to watch. Obviously, I think it's going to turn into a grappling match, but I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think Miller is someone that will, even if he's off his back, he's active and he's fighting. I think that would be quite a good fight to watch.
Definitely. I need to stop saying definitely every time somebody ends a sentence. But next we'll move on to lightweight Matt Wyman versus Paul Sass. But before we do so, we're going to bring you the first edition of a segment we hope to bring you every week. It's a little game show, a little mini game show in between the hosts, if you will. I have 5 tweets pulled up, and I'm not going to let my co-hosts know who tweeted it. Instead, I'm going to give them 4 options, and each one of them has got to guess on who tweeted that tweet. And we're going to do 5 different tweets. Whoever guesses the most after the 5 wins the game show. So without any further ado, which is something I also say a lot. All right, tweets of the week. The first one we're going to start off with, I'll quote it right now. Shout out to my dick and balls for sticking together after all these years. And your 4 options are Rashad Evans, Tyrone Spong, Miguel Torres, and Peter Eretz.
I'll go for Tyrone Spong.
Patrick?
You know what? That's just a hilarious tweet. I'm going to go for the long shot. I'm going to go Peter Eretz.
I like your guys. I like the cut of your toe there. I'm going to go Miguel Torres because I know he's a dirty, dirty man.
He is a dirty man. He actually got kicked out of the UFC at one point for a explicit tweet, and the winner is Ray. That was tweeted out by Mr. Tyrone Spong. So
damn you!
Ray has 1 point going into the second round of 5. And our second tweet is, whoa, Walking around this Mr. Olympia Expo sure makes me feel dainty. Winky face. Was it Miocic Tate, Ian McCall, Ronda Rousey, or Joseph Benavidez?
Ronda Rousey.
Joe B.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm going Joe B with that one.
All right, I'm going to kind of side myself with Ray on this one. I'm going Haunted Housey as well.
Haunted Housey is the correct answer. It was Ronda Rousey tweeted that out. He's got 2 points. Chris had 1. P-Money, a pathetic 0 points. But
Goose egg.
you still have time to come back.
Not this week.
I'm like the Dodgers. I'm going to win out.
Unlike the Dodgers or the Rays.
What Europe does, you just come back from nowhere. I'm on with 3 Americans. Let's rub it in.
Well,
There goes the Ryder Cup.
Rub it
I'll tell
in.
you what, Ray. If you end up winning, I'll still feel okay about it because we won 2 wars against y'all.
Hey-oh.
Oh.
Yeah, that was a historic collapse by the Americans at the Ryder Cup. But moving on to our third tweet. Hey, Dana White. Me and Glover, speaking about Glover Teixeira, me and Glover are both 1-0 in the UFC at 205. We both have wins over the same guy. I'll do my best to play spoiler. Was it Jimmy Manuwa, Tom Lawler, Ryan Jimmo, or Stanislav Nedkov?
I'm going to go with Jimmy Manuwa.
I think I would be mentally deficient if I didn't pick Jimmy Manuwa.
I got Manuwa all day, son.
Manuwa. The correct answer to that is Tom Lawler. Lawler actually Glover Teixeira. Lawler, if you remember, is 1-0 in the UFC at 205 pounds. So nobody gets a point for that one.
Oh, that was the red herring.
That was
That was a curveball.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Tom Lawler calling out Glover Teixeira.
There's a fight I don't care for much.
me neither. Next up, we have a women's MMA tweet, and it's hashtag things that stink. UFC excluding the girls. Hashtag we want to play too. Was that Haunted Housey, Liz Carmouche, Marlos Conan, or Miocic Tate?
I'm going to say Miocic Tate.
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. I'll go with Liz Carmouche.
You know what?
Yeah.
Too safe to go with Tate. I'm pretty sure that's the right answer, but I'm going to side up to Patrick here and say that's Carmouche.
Should have gone with your gut. Ray pulls ahead with a Miocic Tate was that speaker, and I believe that locks it up for Ray with 3 points. Chris has 1. P-Money still.
Make it interesting. Let's put both their points together.
Definitely.
I've got less heart than Phil Mickelson, gentlemen.
And our last tweet, which we'll do anyway, if you have any small children around, make sure to do earmuffs. If you're at work, maybe turn the podcast down a little bit, because this is an explicit tweet, and it reads, I don't give a fuck. Chris Isaak songs still get me wet. Was it Ian McCall, Forrest Griffin, Rampage Jackson, or Renato Laranja? Right?
I'll go Forrest Griffin.
It's got to be Forrest Griffin.
I'm going Renato, baby, all the way.
Renato. It was actually Forrest Griffin. Ray takes 4 out of 5.
Ooh.
Dominates. Chris and Patrick both end up with a point. And Ray. Did he?
No, he got 1 point. Did you only get 1 point, Patrick?
Just the single measly point. I'm a perennial loser like the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Calling out my scorekeeping abilities, Ray. You bastard.
Sorry.
But, that concludes our first edition of Guess That Tweet. Ray dominates, takes 4 points of the possible 5, and next week we will bring you Tweet of the Week as well. See if Ray can continue his dominance over the paltry Americans.
Ray, your silky smooth voice lulls me into sleep. That's what it is. That's what I wasn't on the top of my game. I was listening to your voice.
It's a hypnotic siren's call is what it is. It's just, it lures you to your doom.
His voice is like a smooth, velvety scotch.
That was my game plan going in. I spoke to my cornerman. He said, soothe them.
Soothe them down. And you definitely succeeded. But yeah, enough of the bullshitting. Let's get back to breaking down fights. We had Matt Wyman fighting Paul Sass. First round submission, and if I were to say that this fight would end by first round submission, I think any knowledgeable MMA fan would have put his money on Paul Sass. It was actually Matt Wyman pulling off the armbar 348 into the fight. It was the submission of the night. It was an amazing display of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Wyman actually was taken down immediately. Sass took him toward the fence. A Kimura was attempted. Sass pulls out, lands some shots from the top. Wyman goes for a triangle. Sass gets out. And then finally Wyman gets an arm, actually switches arms, and Sass had nowhere to go. Gets his first loss, which ironically comes by submission. Chris, what did you think of that ending? That was insane.
Well, let me step back to when we broke this fight down on the last MMA Podcast episode. I believe it was episode 15. I said that Matt Wyman's greatest attribute is his grit. You know, it's not that he has heart or determination. It's his grit. He can never count that guy out. I mean, he's had wars with Jim Miller and I think he fought Cole Miller, I believe. You know, and he's fought Dennis Seaver, fought some really good guys. The reason I was going against him was because Paul Sass fought a guy named help me out. The wrestler who called out Obama. Help me out. I'm at a loss for a name.
Volkman.
Yes, Volkman. Christmas Volkman. He submitted Volkman rather easily, and I feel that Volkman is a far superior grappler. So that's why I went for Sass. I said by finish, but this was literally the Paul Daly, Nick Diaz of the grappling fight in the lightweight division. It was just, from the get-go till the brilliant finish, it was just exciting stuff, and I think Matt Wyman is going to get a big step up in his next fight.
Ray?
Sorry. Yeah, it was a brilliant fight. The grappling from both sides was good. I mean, Sass went for a couple of heel hooks as well. Obviously, I was in the crowd. I was absolutely gutted because, we're cheering on Paul Sass. But I like Matt Wyman as well. I think Matt Wyman, like Chris said, he's grit. But Matt, he's not just his grit, but he's exciting to watch as well. Matt Wyman doesn't do boring fights. He brings it every time. If he's on his back, he's looking to move. He's looking to work for his back. So I like Matt Wyman as well. But obviously, I was rooting for Sass. It was a brilliant fight. I was glad it won submission of the night because there was a really good submission earlier on under the prelims from obviously Gunnar Nelson, but for me it was the right one to win submission. It was the nature of the submission and who it was against which stood it out. But yeah, it was a really, really exciting grappling match.
Yeah, that really was just a fantastic fight, and I was really impressed with Paul Sass. I was wondering if he was able to get it to the ground, which he always looks to get it to the ground. I mean, obviously, with the heel hooks and the triangles that he's so capable of, that's really where he wants to be. But I had envisioned Matt Wyman taking him down, probably working in Sass's guard, and it really didn't work like that. Paul Sass came out, and he was really aggressive. He got the takedown, and he was controlling Matt Wyman. He was I thought it was going to be a round one submission for Paul Sass quite easily. And like Chris had alluded to, he's a gritty, and I would dare even say he's a grimy fighter, Matt Wyman. He is dirty. He will just rub those elbows in your face like he's just mushing your face in the mud or something, just like a bully. And, those kind of intangible factors really go a long way in the sport of MMA. And, gosh, I don't think any of us are going to be selling Matt Wyman very short in his next fight.
No, not at all. Wyman ups his stock tremendously. and tapping out a submission master in Paul Sass, and I really strongly agree with Chris that he'll hopefully get a pretty big step up in caliber of opponent. I think he was a top 25 guy before. Now he's probably top 10, top 15 in the UFC. I'd like to see him fight a guy like Khabib. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his last name. Nurmagomedov.
Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, perhaps even a Jim Miller. Even though Miller is coming off a loss, that would be an excellent wrestling match. A good way for either Miller to get back into the top 10 of the lightweights, or for Wyman to really make his presence known in the top 10. Really a lot of different guys in that 155-pound division you could stack him up against. What do you think about his next fight, Chris?
I enjoyed the Miller rematch. They originally fought in December of 2010. 2008. It was that long ago. It was Miller's second fight in the UFC. I think it got fight of the night, I believe. Miller couldn't finish Wyman after Wyman hurt him in the first round. He rallied back. Great fight. I actually would like to see Wyman against a guy that he can't bully around, which Patrick was talking about. I'd like to see him against Gleison Tibau. I think that would be a fantastic fight. I know he's coming off of a loss, but stylistically I think that would be a great fight because Tibau, cuts about 30 pounds to make the weight division, and I think he would really test Matt Wyman's technical abilities.
Two guys that jump out at me that I'm thinking of. I think Matt Wyman versus Joe Lauzon would be a great fight. Both very similar style, both aggressive. Both come to fight every single time. I'd be excited to see that fight. Another fight is a highly ranked opponent, but he's kind of an up and down opponent. But it'd be a good test for Wyman because if the fight stays on the feet, Wyman's probably going to lose. But we know what Wyman can do on the ground. But I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Marvin Gillard. I think that'd be a good fight as well.
Yeah, I think you guys really are pulling together some good matchups here. Chris, you mentioned Wyman taking on Tibau. You read my mind there. I think he's fighting Massaron Duba, who is fighting on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil.
He's actually fighting Francisco Trinaldo in 2 weeks. Yep. Okay,
yeah, and he's another huge lightweight, so that would be interesting. And since it's in 2 weeks, I think the timing works out really well for that. And very similar styles. If I had to pick one other person, I wouldn't mind seeing him against perhaps Anthony Pettis or maybe even a Donald Cerrone. I don't know if that really works out standings-wise, but Matt Wyman, he's a long-tenured UFC veteran, which is sometimes something that I know I often forget.
I think another pretty intriguing matchup would be him against TJ Grant. Both probably the guys who are flying under the radar the most in that lightweight division. I'd love to see the comedian Grant, who's coming off 3 wins against Shane Roller, Carlo Prater, and Evan Dunham, to see who really belongs in the top 10 of the 155 division.
Yeah, just to let you know, to answer your question, Patrick, Pettis and Cerrone are tentatively scheduled to face each other. Nate Diaz is going to face Ben Henderson for the title in, I think, November, and then the winner of the Pettis-Cerrone fight will get the next title shot. That's I'm pretty sure that's happening.
Okay, yeah, that does sound about right. I know they've been trying to set that matchup on Twitter for quite some time now, and it does seem like that one's coming into fruition. So perhaps him versus Gleison Tibau, if Tibau provides victorious in his fight in a couple weeks, perhaps that would be a good one that could get set up.
Yeah, Wyman was kind of floating around there in the top 15, top 20 of the UFC lightweights, but now he's a win away from being top 5, maybe 2 or 3 wins away from a title shot if he's able to string something really impressive together. And if there's one guy who I think could do it flying under the radar as much as he is, it would be him, just because the amount of grit he brings out there in the cage. So we'll go from submission of the night, Wyman's first round armbar against Paul Sapp, Sass. And the next fight was knockout of the night, first round knockout of Yves Jabouin by Brad Pickett. That was a great striking match. You know, we had kind of back to back had a couple of clinics. Wyman versus Sass was a jiu-jitsu clinic, and Pickett versus Jabouin was a stand-up clinic. Yves was landing all sorts of crazy kicks, head kicks, spinning body kicks. Even though it started off the first few seconds, Pickett got his eye poked. Pickett really damaged Jabouin more than Jabouin was doing to Pickett with those kicks. And 340 in, just lands a devastating uppercut, sends Yves down to the mat, lands a couple of shots before Leon Roberts can get in there and separate him, and then he goes Gangnam Style on us, galloping around the ring like that Korean rapper Psy. Pretty entertaining all around from the knockout to the post-fight celebration. That was an awesome fight.
I think Brad Pickett is awesome. He's just an entertainer, whether he's fighting, whether he's talking. He just knows what to do. He's got character, he's got charisma, but on top of that, the most important thing, when he's in the cage, he backs it up. I mean, it was the win against Yves Jabouin. It wasn't so much impressive that he beat Yves Jabouin, because I think a lot of people thought he would, but I think it was impressive that he beat him the way he did, and he beat him on the feet. Because I know, me for one, I thought that his advantage was going to be on the ground, and he'd get him down, and he'd get a submission. But that uppercut was just gorgeous. I mean, the timing on it was beautiful. And he was out. I mean, he threw a few punches afterwards, but he was out from the uppercut. But it was just amazing to watch. I mean, I think Pickett is one of the most exciting fighters at the minute, easily in the bantamweight division.
That's why they call him One Punch.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I co-signed Mr. Ray. Brad Pickett, going back to his WC run, he completely dominated Demetrius Johnson, which nobody really does, and he did it with grappling. And DJ is usually the guy to dictate where it goes. He put an absolute smackdown on him, and then he fought Ivan Menjivar at WC 53 in a very exciting fight of the night performance. And just onward, he came into the UFC, and he got, he had to step back against Renan Barão, but that was in his hometown. He said he got a little too pumped up, and Renan Barão is who he is. So, it's just one of those things where you look at Yves Jabouin, he has looked great in his wins, but he doesn't finish anyone. For a guy with a nickname like Tiger, he's going in there and getting, unanimous decisions against guys, and then getting completely stomped by guys like Pablo Garza at featherweight. He got stopped by Mark Hominick. And then in his recent run in the UFC, I think he had 3 straight wins, all by decision. I believe it was 3. It might have been 2. But, he beat Hoagland. He beat Wyatt Watson. I believe he beat Ian Loveland, too. And, Brad Pickett came in there and used some really technical, effective boxing. He had great head movement. And, he finished Demasio Page in the fight before this, and now he finished Yves Jabouin in the first round, and nobody knocks Yves Jabouin out. I think it's time for a top 5 opponent for Mr. Pickett.
Top 5, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
You know what? I was going to echo Chris's sentiments exactly. Brad Pickett, he's one of the only other people, him and Dominic Cruz are the only people to have ever beaten Demetrius Johnson inside mixed martial arts. So he's definitely got all the skills. He's got great wrestling. He really does have some of the best technical boxing at 135. I would put his boxing up there with Mayday McDonald's. I might favor Mayday in a boxing match, but Brad Pickett, and like Ray had alluded to, he's got just such great charisma. He's a fan favorite in the UK, I'm sure, as well as here in the United States. And I had picked Brad Pickett to win this fight by first round knockout, but I was a little hesitant just because, like Chris had mentioned, Jabouin, he did have 3 straight victories. I believe 2 were split decision, 1 was unanimous. And as we had seen, Pickett had a little setback against Barão, and I just thought, well, they kind of do have similar styles. And Jabouin, he did put up a very good fight. Like Jake, you had said, he came out and he was throwing the kitchen sink. He was throwing the knees, the elbows, all kinds of spinning back kicks and what such. And Pickett just came through with that spectacular boxing, and that was just a picture perfect knockout. I would put that up there very high for knockout of the year. I found it kind of similar. McDonald finished Miguel Torres with an uppercut, and I think this was probably even cleaner and just more emphatic because Jabouin is kind of a tough style matchup for Pickett. But he's got 2 wins in a row himself here, and I definitely think he needs a big step up as well.
Yeah, and Pickett, a few fights ago lost to Renan Barao, who is now interim champion. Before that, lost to Scott Jorgensen. I love seeing a matched up against a guy who just knocked out Scott Jorgensen, and that's a guy we've had on the MMA podcast before, Eddie Wineland. That would be a fight of a couple of 135 pounders who can go out there and throw bombs. Both of them in their last fights are coming off incredible knockouts. And I mean that for a bantamweight fight, I don't know if we would see more knockout power in the cage at the same exact time. That would be an amazing knockout or an amazing fight. And I'm pretty sure one of those guys, even though they both have pretty iron chins, both of them throw bombs, and I don't think we'd see that one going the full 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good fight. I'd also, if I was to pick an opponent for him, I think I'd like to see him go up against Mike Easton. Mike Easton's on a good run at the minute. I think Pickett has looked better in his wins, where Easton is winning, but maybe not looking as good. But I'm not a fan of Easton. I'd like to see Pickett knock him out, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would go. Both of those guys are great. Wineland comes from a Greco-Roman background. He actually kind of held his own against Uriah Faber in the first and early second of their fight back at UFC 128. He lost to Joseph Benavidez, which is no knock on him. And, like we've all brought up, Brad Pickett is just a phenomenal fighter with great, well-rounded skills. I think somebody's going to get finished in that fight. I don't know who, and I actually think that is the absolute perfect fight for Mr. Pickett, other than a Uriah Faber fight.
Yeah, lots of great matchups. I could see him taking on any of the opponents you guys have mentioned. Myself, I think one matchup that could be made would be him versus Eric El Goyito Perez. He's a young fighter fighting out of Greg Jackson's camp, and we just saw him absolutely just obliterate Ken Stone. I believe that was just a couple weeks ago, and if I'm not mistaken, he had set the UFC and WEC, of course, retroactively, record for fastest knockout at 135 pounds. Prior to that, he got a submission win, albeit a controversial technical submission against John Albert. I think that would be a good test. However, that might be a little bit too high of a step up for Perez. So if that were the case, I think Eddie Wineland would be a superb matchup, like you guys have mentioned. Wineland gets severely underrated, I think. You guys mentioned he had a fantastic knockout and just a great war against Scott Jorgensen. Prior to that, he had fought Joe B. and as well as Uriah Faber. And he did very well in his own right in those two fights. And, of course, those two guys right there, it's no shame losing either of them. Just about everyone who fights them does. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who Brad Pickett gets next. It
really is. I think Pickett, it's not really arguable at this point that he's a top 10 UFC guy. I don't know what Uriah Faber's plans are for the next few months. I also know Michael McDonald is a top bantamweight sitting out there without an opponent, and that might be pretty interesting. But Pickett versus Wineland, probably the best two boxers in that bantamweight division. Both of them, like I said earlier, coming off amazing knockout victories. And before we move on to the co-main event, unless any of you guys have anything to throw in on that Pickett fight, let's move into our second segment.
I'm ready for Bonehead of the Week.
Yeah, Bonehead of the Week. we're all going to nominate who we think was our bonehead of the week, whether it was ourselves, whether it was a fighter, whether it was a group of people, someone we just were kind of annoyed with, and all of us are going to throw our nominations in the hat, and then afterwards go around. We can't pick our own nomination, go around and pick who we think is the supreme bonehead of the week. So without any further ado.
Boom, 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 boom. Now tell me what you gonna do, but it ain't nowhere to run.
My bonehead of the week is the UK media. No offense, Ray, but I cannot stand watching post-fight press conferences that go on in the United Kingdom. The same goes with a few other places, Australia being one. But if you ever watch a post-fight press conference in the United Kingdom, literally 3 out of every 4 questions is something about when are you coming back to England? When are you going to do a show in Liverpool? When are we going to get a title fight? We want Bisping Silva. When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? Whereas there are tons of interesting questions to be asked to fighters, coming off victories, coming off losses, calling out guys. We had Stefan Struve call out Fabricio Verdum, which I thought was incredibly interesting. Instead, it seems like all they want to know and ask about is when are you coming back, which I really think the UFC has made a pretty concerted effort to do a lot of cards in the UK. They have a growing fan base. They're doing a card in China soon, doing cards in Australia. The southeast U.S. where I grew up, I think we've gotten one card in the last 3 or 4 years. So, as much as I understand where you're coming from and that you really do want to have as many fights as possible in the UK, stop asking. It's starting to get kind of pathetic, UK media.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mine is Gunnar Nelson. He had a fantastic domination of DeMarcus Johnson and, looked great in doing it. But he, in his celebration, did that stupid Gangnam. Am I pronouncing it right? Is it Gangnam? Gangnam? Something like that?
Gangnam.
Yeah, I hate that. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't want to see it. To me, it's just a bonehead move to use some played-out dance in your celebration. Do something original. Come on, man. Come on,
hey, sexy lady.
My bonehead of the week is 8 pounds overweight. Catch weight 175, you weigh in at 183. I'm picking DeMarcus Johnson.
Yeah, and my bonehead of the week, I've actually got a few nominees. First, I'd like to nominate myself, MMA Playground, and in my sleep-deprived haste. Somehow I picked John McGuire over John Hathaway, unanimous decision, which is not at all what I was going to do, and I can take pictures of my fight camp board. I picked Hathaway UD, and I've got the Tapology record to prove it. But enough about that. Bigger boneheads, Rashad Evans, Matt Mitrione. These guys are offered big fights, headline fights. Rashad Evans was offered a fight against Glover Teixeira. He said he didn't have enough time. He was out of shape, and he did not have sufficient notice. You need at least 8 weeks for a camp. That's just not what we like to hear, especially a guy who's been as injury-prone and layoff-prone as Rashad Evans. How are you not going to be in fighting shape, man? That's how you're getting injured in the first place. You're off, you're on. You need to stick with that training because then you get out of shape, you get back in the gym, and guess what? You injure yourself, and now John Jones, the UFC champion. Sorry to bring up old stuff. And Matt Mitrione, he was offered a headline fight against Daniel Cormier. Both are relatively young in their careers, although Daniel Cormier, I think he's got a little bit better all-around game. I think he's fought a little bit tougher competition. Matt Mitrione, his best win is over Joey Beltran versus Daniel Cormier. He's got just a fantastic annihilation of Antonio Big Silva on his record, as well as just a thorough beatdown of Josh Barnett and just a 5-round domination that saw everybody breaking their hands. Mitrione, 34, he's not the youngest heavyweight in the world. Granted, he's still relatively young in his career, but he needs to get going. He's another guy I think started out hot, had a lot of real promise, but he's just been sitting on the sidelines for a while now, and it's time to step it up. It's time to kick that career in gear. And as a fan of the meathead, I want to see him in the cage.
Yeah, Dana White had choice words for him too. I believe said about Mitrione, said that he makes him sick. And, you know, I couldn't have put it better myself. Isn't the youngest heavyweight around. Offered a title shot in Strikeforce. Beating Cormier would be easily the signature win of his career. Turning that down, a little bit questionable. And as much as I do want to pick Patrick as my bonehead of the month, I got to go with DeMarcus Johnson. I think, Chris, you said it last week. Guys are only expected to do a few things, show up to press conferences, make weight. You know, it's not really that much. And, you know, all right, maybe weighing over 0.2 like we saw. Who was that who weighed in 0.2 over last week?
It was Charlos.
Oh, Charles Oliveira.
Carlos Oliveira, yeah. Maybe 0.2, all right, you miscalculated your weigh-in. All right, weighing in 8 pounds over is like a Anthony Johnson move. That's something that could have gotten him cut. It's unexcusable, and my vote for Bonehead of the Week goes to DeMarcus Johnson. Chris?
Yeah, I am going to go ahead and say Rashad and Mitrione just because, you know, I can't stand these guys turning down fights. It seems to be some kind of disease at this point. So I'm going to go ahead with those guys. They had the opportunity to really build their career up, and they're turning it down. And as much as I hate fighters missing weight, I got even less respect for someone who does that.
My vote goes to Rashad and Mitrione as well. Don't turn down fights. What are you in the game for? You know, you want to work your way up. You want your opportunities. Here's an opportunity. I don't want it. No, forget it. Yeah, I'm voting for Rashad and Mitrione as well.
And we saw it happen to Lyoto Machida a couple weeks ago. He was offered the shot at John Jones, turned it down, and Dana White's now going to make him go through Dan Henderson. We don't know what's going to happen there. Henderson defeated Shogun, who I think proved he was a better fighter than Machida and in their couple of fights back-to-back against each other. But, yeah, you know, that's really inexcusable to turn down fights. Patrick?
Yeah, you know, this is just a really tough pick. So many boneheads this week, including myself. But I think I'm going to have to go with DeMarcus Johnson just because this guy, I give him all the credit in the world just for the heart. I mean, he had a good fight with Mike Swick. I don't even think it was 2 months ago. Got knocked out pretty good in that one. And I mean, this guy was just barely off his mandatory suspension. He says, "Yeah, let me take the catchweight fight at 175." I mean, from the day of the weigh-in, he just looked like a guy who was bummed. He knew he was going to get his ass handled. He knew he was just there for a paycheck. If you go back and find the weigh-in videos, you can see that is just the look of a defeated man a day before he even got in the cage. So, what are you doing, DeMarcus? You're the bonehead of the week.
And looking at a tie between DeMarcus Johnson and Mitrione and Rashad Evans, I think all three are boneheads and very deserving of our inaugural Bonehead of the Week award. So moving on, which Bonehead of the Week and Tweet of the Week, or just that tweet titles both in the works, we'll try and bring to you every week. But moving on to the co-main event, we had the hometown boy Dan Hardy fighting Amir Sadallah. And if you would have told me a couple years ago that Hardy would be taking down Amir Sadallah, I would have told you that you had to be shitting me. Because in his fight against George St. Pierre, he had some of the worst takedown defense. I mean, his takedown defense was literally nothing. Didn't struggle at all. Was just kind of taken down. Horrible takedown defense to fight against Amir Sadallah, who has pretty decent wrestling, fights out of Extreme Couture. And yeah, that first round I gave to Amir Sadallah. He clinched him up, had better striking, but Dan Hardy coming back, winning the second and the third round, winning a decision, which, if, sort of with the Sass-Wyman fight, if you would have said it was a first-round submission, most people would have said Sass. If you would have said Hardy-Sadala goes to a decision, I think most people would have voted that fight's won by Amir Sadala, but Hardy looked really impressive. A stat on behalf of my MMA podcast co-host Chris, I think he had 3 takedowns and 1 trip during the fight, correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Yeah, I mean, God, it was really amazing. It's really a great thing to see Hardy, who is a fan favorite from the excitement he brings in the ring and out of the ring. Really a gregarious personality. Everyone loves that red mohawk. And, yeah, he brought it to Amir Sadala, really starting to round off his skills and defeated Amir Sadala unanimously. Patrick?
Yeah, it certainly was just a fantastic fight. There are so many fight of the night candidates on this card. I know we had all talked about it, gentlemen, that this was just, if not a card for big names, a card for fantastic style matchups. And this fight certainly did not disappoint. That first round, it was so close. To me, I could see that going to either guy. I could see that being a 10-10 easily. Even if you go back and you watch that first round of the fight, I believe it was Dan Hardy who went to initiate the takedown, and they both just kind of fell side by side, each kind of trying to go for an underhook or something, and they kind of landed side by side on their knees as the buzzer rang. And I said, gosh, that kind of defines the first round right there, just so even. It looked like Amir was coming forward. He really had the pressure. Showed some of that good Muay Thai that we've seen the flashes of. We haven't seen him put it together consistently, but he had it in that first round. At the same time, Hardy did a good job with some counters, landed some really solid shots, and like Jake said, from rounds 2 and 3 on, Hardy he found his rage, he found his timing. Perhaps the hometown crowd just had the adrenaline going a little extra, and but after that he settled in. He was working his counters. He was mixing up levels very excellently. Definitely a good wrinkle in the game of Dan Hardy to see. And he went from winning 4 in a row in the UFC to losing 4 in a row. Now he's got 2 in a row under his belt. So hopefully he's back on the upswing, and I love seeing the improvement. And I'm sure everyone was very excited in the arena that night in Great Britain.
Well, I'm going to go against the grain here. I'm just going to start by saying that this match to me made absolutely no sense. For me, this fight was set up for one reason, that was for Hardy to get an impressive win in his home city. The reason I say that is, one, Hardy's last fight was a knockout over Duane Ludwig. Before Duane Ludwig fought Dan Hardy, Duane Ludwig beat Amir Sadala. Now, you win a fight, you move up the ladder. So where was the sense in him fighting an opponent who lost the opponent he beat? For me, it just made no sense at all. So I was down on the fight before it started. Watching the fight, for me, it was near enough as bad as the Hathaway-Maguire fight. Hardy came in. He didn't want to obviously strike, so he was looking for the wrestling. Hardy's not a wrestler. Hardy's is a kickboxer. That's his bread and butter. That's what he should have stuck with. For me, for Hardy to have moved on from that fight, he needed to win impressively. He needed to knock Sadala out. He didn't do that. He basically took him down and lay on him and went for a decision. I was personally disappointed with Dan Hardy. I thought it was bad matchmaking by the UFC, and I just hope that Hardy's won 2 in a row now. Give him a decent opponent. Give him an opponent where if he beats him, it means something. Because for me, that win didn't mean anything.
Yeah, I agree with some of the things you're saying. Absolutely, like the matchup itself. What does it mean? But I'm going to go against your grain with my grain, and that Dan Hardy really impressed the hell out of me. It wasn't. You were right. It wasn't the most exciting fight. It was more of a technical scrap mixed in with. Hello. There weren't too many.
We got you.
There weren't too many scrambles, but I've never liked Dan Hardy to begin with until recently, because he had 4 wins on his march to the title. That's Akihiro Gano, Rory Markham, Marcus Davis, and Mike Swick. Now, none of those guys are world beaters. Mike Swick is the biggest name on there, and he's coming off of a long layoff and everything, and then he talks a bunch of trash on GSP, gets dominated, then loses by knockout, and then we all know what happens after that. So it's just nice to see Hardy come in there with a couple of decent wins, one by finish, one not. He actually mixed in a lot of knees and kicks, which, Hardy's a fantastic kickboxer, and he fell in love with his left hook so much that he stopped using those knees and those leg kicks and those turning side kicks and the head kicks. He's a fantastic striker. So it's just nice to see him actually, kind of flesh out those skills of his. And, it was just nice to see him do that. I actually think that going to Brazil and taking some ayahuasca after his win with Ludwig has somehow transformed him. And, see who they match him up with next. I'd like to see a grappling-based fighter to see really how well Hardy has shored up those techniques.
Definitely. I wonder what his spirit animal told him. Probably told him to work in a few more kicks, a few more knees, let him back to the light. But yeah, Hardy won 4 in a row in the UFC. Then he got that title shot against GSP, lost 4 in a row to St. Pierre, Condit, Anthony Johnson, and Chris Lytle. Now he's on a 2-fight win streak against Duane Ludwig and Amir Sadollah. As far as his next opponent goes, I have 2 different ideas in my mind. Dong Young Kim fights Paulo Thiago in November. I think the winner of that, probably DHK. A fight between Hardy and Kim would both be an ideal way to reintroduce them both to the elite of the welterweight division. And another guy who, it's unsure whether or not he's going to fight again in the UFC, but they've been talking a lot of trash back and forth, and Dana White said he'd always leave the door open for him. Matt Hughes. I think Hardy and Hughes would be a pretty interesting matchup. Hardy is obviously, especially with these last couple fights, more well-rounded on the feet, but, his main sticking point has been takedown defense, and Hughes is an amazing wrestler. That would be a compelling matchup to see Hughes take on Dan Hardy sometime maybe early next year. Patrick?
Yeah, that's a real intriguing matchup. They have been having their little feud back and forth, the verbal sparring and the Twitter jabs at each other. It looks like Dan Hardy's been a little more vocal about Matt Hughes as opposed to the other way around. But definitely a good fight, one you could certainly hype up. Another one I was thinking about, and I don't know if this one really makes sense rankings-wise, but I feel that it could. CR Bahadurzada, I'm just terribly butchering that name. Let me just say CR the Killer. I'd like to see that matchup. He just looks like a real heavy hitter. He's got a lot of hype behind him. He's been waiting a long time to get in the UFC. And to me, it seems like that's another guy that really no one wants to fight. And, Dan Hardy, he's been to the top. He's been to the top of the ladder, at least fighting in title contention against GSP. And he's got a couple good, solid wins now against, your mid-range competition, let me say. And so he needs that step up, and I think that would be a good way to go.
Just going over some of the guys you already said, I'm not keen on him fighting Dong Young Kim, because for me that's just going to be Kim lying on Hardy for 15 minutes. I know Hardy had some takedowns to Sadollah, but Hardy's wrestling is not the level of someone like Kim. And Kim is one of these guys who's effective, but he's not great. So unless you can neutralise the wrestling, you're going to struggle, and I think he'll do that. I like the idea of him fighting Matt Hughes. I think that would be a really good fight, just because Matt Hughes is a legend, and I know Hughes is obviously, again, is the wrestler, but for me, Matt Hughes was always exciting with the wrestling. I'd love to see him, do the old style pick up and slam. I think, I like Matt Hughes. I think that would be a really good fight. And the way Hardy talks and picks up a fight, because Hardy's great at getting inside his opponent's head. He did it with Marcus Davis. He really rolled Marcus Davis. So I'd like that fight. I like the fight with Sia as well. I think that would be a great fight. But I've said earlier on in the show, and I'll say it again, we saw 2 Brits fight on the card just gone. It weren't the best fight, but it was 2 UK guys fighting. I'd like to see Dan Hardy fight Che Mills. I think that fight makes sense. I think they're both at a kind of a similar level, I feel. I mean, They're both. I mean, Hardy's on a 2-fight win streak, but he's not beaten anyone that's really worth shouting out about. Che Mills has won 2, lost 1. Obviously, he lost to Rory McDonald. No shame in that. The 2 guys he's beat, similar kind of level to me are the guys that Hardy's beat. So yeah, I'd like to see Dan Hardy and Che Mills.
Yeah, that's all solid things. I mean, the Hughes, you got that rivalry. Che, you've got 2 British guys who love to stand and bang. I actually have 2 kind of different ones. I know I've brought up Matt Brown a lot, but I think Matt Brown, he's on a 3-fight win streak, 2 finishes, excuse me, 1 submission. It's yet again, he would be a great litmus test for Dan Hardy. Let's see where he really stands against a super well-rounded guy. That's the one that makes the most sense to me, but the one that I want to see the most is actually Thiago Alves. I know he's coming off of a loss, but he's, been a higher rank than Hardy for a long time, and he wasn't being beaten too badly by top competition, and I think stylistically that's the one I'd love to see the most because, you're going to see a really technical kickboxing fight out of those 2.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I'm really a sucker for those verbal wars, and Hardy Hughes would really be interesting. I think Hardy's been going after Hughes just to get that fight. Hughes will take a picture next to an elk that he just shot and post it up on Twitter. Hardy called him out. I forget exactly what he said, but said a few funny things about his hunting trip. Yeah, I would love to see that matchup as well, though, Chris. There's a lot of interesting scenarios you could throw him into, but we'll move on to the main event. The main event fight of the night. Both guys pocketed $40,000. Stefan Struve defeats Stipe Miocic 3 minutes and 50 seconds into the second round. And we saw 2 different Stipe Miocic's. I don't know what the plural of Miocic is, but we saw two different versions. The first round actually gave to Stipe Miocic, landed a few pretty good kicks, a couple good knees. Struve tried a flying knee, a couple different items at Miocic. It didn't really work. And in the second round, I don't know if Struve just ratcheted it up that much or Miocic came out as a different fighter, but Miocic just did not have an answer for Struve in the second round. Something that I was talking about during the fight, I was actually yelling at the TV. I was like, fight back! Come on, fight back! Struve was just going after Miocic, who was literally running away from him, Clay Guida style. Miocic didn't have an answer for him and kind of just stood there and took punishment until he finally, his knees buckled. He was on roller skates. Struve smelled blood, ran in there, landed some devastating uppercuts with Miocic's back up against the cage. And luckily, Herb Dean, I believe was the ref in that fight, ran in to rescue Miocic. Struve looked very, very good. Stops it in the second round. It was actually Stipe Miocic's first loss. Really, really great fight. And we should see Struve. I mean, Struve is maybe 2 wins away from making it to the title, and he's a really young guy too. Struve, just 24 years old. He's getting better and better and better, and I think we might eventually see him get a title shot, just taking to contention how young he is. Man, it was really a great performance put in by Stefan Struve. Submission of the night in his last fight against LeVar Johnson. Fight of the night, this time against Stipe Miocic. Amazing fight. What did you see in that one, Chris? Yeah,
amazing fight, and he has really put the hard work in and dominated a tough guy in Stipe Miocic. As far as him ever sniffing out a title, I don't think so. He's had fights where he's been stopped in impressive fashion by, Junior Dos Santos, obviously. He got stopped by Big Country, Travis Brown, and he also got nearly dominated by guys like Dennis I think it's Stoynik, something like that, back in the day. He got really beaten badly, and then he also had a fight against, I can't remember his name, some lower-level guy who's 1-3 in the UFC.
Christian Moorcraft.
Yes, Moorcraft. He got absolutely handled by Moorcraft. So there's 5 compelling arguments for him not really ever getting to the top. I don't really see him ever beating anyone like Overeem, Velasquez, obviously Dos Santos, who put the finishing touches on him, Cormier even. There's just so many guys ahead of him that I don't really see him getting a title shot anytime soon. Maybe, in a couple years, but on his current path with the devastating losses he's had, I don't really see him making it to the title.
Yeah, I kind of agree with where you're going there, Chris. You look back at the early career that Stefan Struve has had, and even if you go back and look at his record, he's got a win over Paul Buentello. Now, maybe it's just me. I don't know if you guys recall that fight. I thought he lost that fight. I mean, he got 4 teeth knocked out of his mouth. It was just an absolute beating, the kind that, was really what we saw out of Stefan Struve when he first got to the UFC. He was just a punching bag. I mean, knockout losses to Junior Dos Santos, Roy Nelson. I really feel he lost the Buentello fight, but he got the decision. My thing with him is he's 7 feet tall. He's 24 years old. Apparently he's still growing, which, for someone with his genetics and at the age of 24 is not unfounded. He used to be officially listed at 6'11", but now he's officially listed at 7 foot, first 7-footer in the UFC. But since he's shown up when he was just 6'11", he's never really been able to use that frame the way he should. For a guy who's 6'11", the 6 foot even, Roy Nelson shouldn't be able to get on the inside. And, I mean, that was a Shoryuken Street Fighter II uppercut knockout that Roy Nelson landed on him. You can't let a guy do that when you're 7 feet tall. I mean, if you throw a Anderson Silva-style front kick, you got like a 12-foot wingspan. I picked Struve to win that fight. I even told Josh Gross of ESPN, I told him, I said, hey, Struve's going to win this fight. Only reason I picked him was because when he fought LeVar Johnson and LeVar got him in the clinch, he wasn't overwhelmed. He didn't get knocked out. He pulled guard and he just ripped off a savage armbar. So he's got the well-roundedness in his game, but at the same time, I just think he lets guys get too close to him, and especially if he's calling out guys like Fabricio Verdum, I think it's just going to spell trouble for him in the future. But, hey, hopefully that's, like we said, he's still young. Hopefully he can round that out.
First thing I want to say about Stefan Struve is, I mean, this guy, he looked amazing in this fight. I know what you're saying about some of the fights he's had earlier on, but I think this guy is the most improved guy in the heavyweight division. His improvement reminds me of the kind of improvement we saw from Florian, this guy on Ultimate Fighter Season 1 who really wasn't that good, who just improved, of course, went on to fight for titles. He never won the title, but he had some impressive fights and impressive wins. Steph Struve, he just looks better every time he fights. I mean, he's beating guys who, I think I picked him to lose this fight, I picked him to lose this fight before. Again, another thing that stands out is he's only 24. He's so young, he's got so much more fighting left in him. I don't know how far this guy can go. I don't look too much into he's already had, because I just think he seems like a different fighter from those guys. I know we've talked a bit about his chin, or there's been talk about his chin, but he took some shots from LeVar Johnson and he hung on in. He stood with Miocic and Miocic landed and he never really looked in trouble. And I just think each time Stefan Struve fights, I just think he looks amazing. Another thing that I like about Stefan Struve is, he's 24 years old, so he's obviously a very, very young man. He's a young fighter. But again, he's another classy guy, another classy man, another classy guy. Look at what he did with LeVar Johnson. He got him in the armbar, he clanged the arm, LeVar Johnson tapped the fight over. The first thing Struve does is he gets up and he checks to see, he knows he's hurt LeVar, so he checks to see if he's alright. Again, he's rattling Miocic, he's catching some punches, he was using his length, and he was landing and he was punishing Miocic, and as soon as the ref stops the fight, even before he's gone and done his skyscraper run, which is brilliant, before he does that, he checks to make sure Miocic's alright. He's seeing if he's okay, and then he's off doing a celebration. At the minute, I've got to say, I'm just a big fan of this guy. I just think the way he fights is exciting, and the way he carries himself in the octagon and outside the octagon is brilliant.
I totally agree. I think that comparison of Struve to a Florian who really didn't look that good in the first season of The Ultimate Fighter is a really apt one. And another guy who's made strides, which I don't think Struve has made strides as much as John Jones has, obviously, but Jones is a guy that really demonstrates how well a reach advantage can be used to your advantage, and he keeps guys at bay with those arms and those legs. Obviously, you know, it's lesser of an advantage in the heavyweight division where you have bigger, taller guys, but Struve still is going to have a significant reach advantage against most guys he faces. You know, you will look at the cream of the crop of the heavyweight division, from Dos Santos to Velasquez, Cormier, Overeem, Verdum. Struve has a significant reach advantage against all of those guys, and if he can keep on progressing, you know, he is only 24. Maybe in 4 or 5 years, these guys are starting to get a little bit older. I would not be shocked if in the next 4 years we saw Struve get a title shot, and at some point in his career, just judging off how fast and how quickly accelerated he has progressed with those incredible tools, being 6'11", it'll really be interesting to see who he fights next. You know, looking at the heavyweight division, he had called out Fabricio Verdum during the post-fight press conference. I'd like to see that fight. Struve has gotten 2 submission of the nights in his last 4 fights. I don't think his jiu-jitsu is on the level with Fabricio, but why not? You know, Struve is on a 4-fight win streak, calls out Verdum, give him Verdum.
Yep, co-signed, buddy. Perfect fight. 2 guys with excellent grappling. Verdum's striking has looked incredible as of late. He even looked halfway decent against Alistair Overeem back in their fight in Strikeforce. Absolutely manhandled Big Country and then destroyed Mike Russo. I'd love to see that fight. That's perfect.
Yeah, you know, I could see it being a good fight, and I know I did kind of poo-poo Stefan Struve there earlier. But like we had mentioned, he's 24. If he can just stick to that jab, if he can exercise that range a little bit more, he does have the tools. He comes from a good Dutch kickboxing background, and he does have a fantastic submission game, real good ground game. He's able to use those long limbs really effectively for sweeps. Against a guy like Verdum, though, I don't think he has long limbs on the ground. So I think he definitely want to keep that as a stand-up fight. But rankings-wise, he's won 4 in a row. Verdum, he's always top caliber. So, yeah, hey, why not? There's nowhere else to go for Stefan Struve.
I think Verdum's a great matchup for him personally. I mean, at the moment, I don't rank Stefan Struve in my top 10 at the minute, and not mainly because the guys he's beating are not in the top 10 either. For me, there's that saying, to be the man, you've got to beat the man. So to get into the top 10, you've got to beat a top 10 guy. And if he fights for Fabricio Verdum, if I was to pick that fight now, I'd be picking Struve to win. And I think if he beats Verdum, then I'd be ranking him top 10. I mean, obviously, we know what Struve can do. He likes scrapping, he likes striking. Now, on the feet, I think Struve's got a big advantage over Verdum, because I think, obviously, he's a better kickboxer. But I think if he can keep the distance, he can really land some good shots on Verdum. And I think he's got enough to be able to either, 1, defend the takedown, or 2, if he gets taken down, to be able to neutralise Verdum on the ground and get back to his feet. And I could see Struve winning a decision against Verdum.
Yeah, I think all of us agree that Verdum versus Struve would be an excellent way to test out his submission grit. Only been tapped out once in his whole career, and that was back in 2007 in a European fight league to Christian Mapumbu. Obviously, he's become a much better fighter since. That was 5 years ago. Obviously, too, Fabricio Verdum is a much better jiu-jitsu artist than Christian Mapumbu. But yeah, that would be an excellent fight. And Miocic, unfortunately, with his first loss, falls a little bit further down the ladder. But yeah, you know, it sounded like Dana White was a little open to that Fabricio Verdum fight. Obviously, it'd be a step up from Verdum's last opponent, Mike Russo. That would, I probably see Fabricio winning that, though, just because he's such a brutal submission guy. And we saw with Vitor Jones, in most cases, long limbs are a benefit. But in that fight, I think it might be a little bit of a disadvantage just because Verdum is going to be able to apply more torque and more force to those extra long arms and legs. Theoretically, if they were to a fight, we'll go around the round table one more time before we sign it off. Who would you see winning a match between Verdum and Struve?
I've definitely got Verdum in this one. I think Struve has way too many holes in his striking game, whereas Verdum has actually massively improved since he got knocked out by Dos Santos. He has looked absolutely incredible. He's got amazing front kicks, knees from the clinch. His boxing is much better. Struve, as we all brought up, doesn't fight tall. So I see Verdum not only hurting Struve, but finishing it on the ground.
Very bold prediction there, Chris. I think I would probably go with Verdum if that matchup were made today. Just like he said, he doesn't use that range so much, and Verdum, he really does have really good striking that kind of came out of nowhere, and I don't remember him being TKO'd ever besides a Junior Dos Santos uppercut, which, quite frankly, anyone in the world would be knocked out taking. So, yeah, I'd take Verdum by finish.
I just want to say, I don't know when the last time was that I actually picked a Stefan Struve fight right. I mean, it's just a nightmare. I just do a nightmare to pick. I know a few other people said that as well. But for now, I'll be picking a Struve unanimous decision.
Ooh, Struve unanimous decision going against the grain. Yeah, it'll really be interesting. We'll probably see that if they do get matched up against each other. Struve wasn't injured. Fabricio isn't injured at the moment either. So maybe we could see a potential matchup maybe on that end of the year card on December 29th, where Dos Santos and Velasquez will match up with each other. I think most people think Alistair Overeem is going to get the title shot following that, coming off a suspension. But, yeah, either whether it's late 2012 or early 2013, I think most of us are expecting that Struve-Verdum matchup, and most of us can't wait. So, yeah, big shout-out and thanks to our listeners. We actually had pretty good numbers considering it was our first MMA Roundtable last week. So thank you for tuning in. If you like us, we aren't asking for donations or anything. We just ask that you keep on listening. You tell a friend if you really enjoyed it. MMA Roundtable every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Next week, we're going to break down this Friday's card. We'll let you know what went down on that card, headlined by Travis Brown and Antonio Silva and Ellenberger versus Huron, the fight that was originally supposed to be Koscheck-Ellenberger before Koscheck had to pull out due to injury. And what could end up being a title eliminator for the flyweight division, John Dodson versus Hussier de Silva. We were talking about that, and in all likelihood, we may see the winner of that fight take on Demetrius Johnson for his first title defense. I think we have 4 different fights from UFC 151 that were moved to this card. A lot of fights. I think we have 12 fights. So it's going to be a fun Friday at the Target Center in Minneapolis. Ray, I'll let you plug MMA Mental one more time before we get off the air.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Just to say that on this week's show, me and Patrick will be opening the show with the UFC bantamweight Mitch Gagnon, who's coming off of his first round submission over Willal Watson. He looked very good in that. And then we've teamed up with Lockdown MMA, who are an MMA organisation based out of Manchester in the United Kingdom.
Do we still have Ray?
Ray, buddy.
You know, it seems like we've temporarily lost Ray. Yeah, he was saying we've teamed up with Lockdown MMA. They're based out of Manchester in the United Kingdom. Ray is going to be attending their event. They've hooked him up with the press passes. We're going to speak with the owner of the promotion after the interview with Mitch Gagnon We'll speak with the owner of the promotion, and then we've got 6 fighters lined up to be interviewed on that card. So we're both really looking forward to it. I love the UK scene. They've got a lot of good promotions coming up around there, from your Cage Warriors, your occasional Bama show. They've got a lot of good, exciting promotions around there. So we're looking forward to Wednesday's MMA Mental, and that's at 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time.
All righty then.
I just started spewing off in the mouth and realized I was muted. I think we lost Ray for a second there, but he's back now. Patrick went over Takedown MMA, and that
Lockdown MMA, sir.
Lockdown, something down. Any other bits of information you want to pass on about MMA Mental, Ray?
No, that's it. That's great. Sorry, I was obviously disconnected. Lost my internet, but yeah. So just obviously listen out. Keep a listen out for our shows, and as always, me and Patrick are both excited to be part of this, and we'll be back doing this again next Monday as well.
Definitely, and our podcast.
Yeah.
Definitely, the MMA Podcast, live every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, I actually spoke with both Michael Schiavello and Joey Diaz today. Unfortunately, Schiavello and Diaz both said they want to be on, but they have priors. Schiavello is going to be flying to New York soon to tape something, and Joey Diaz will be in Oregon filming a commercial, but I can't say for what, because that shit's confidential, son. But I'm sure you'll probably see the commercial soon and notice the boisterous Joey Coco Diaz. And we can't wait to have both of those guys on. Obviously, Schiavello being probably the best, or at least the most well-known, the most notorious fight announcer outside of the UFC. Joey Diaz recently at the top of the charts in comedy, and also is very outspoken on the sport of mixed martial arts. Reached out to Renzo Gracie. He hasn't gotten back with me, but we will try to pull down a fighter as soon as possible. Keep your eyes on the MMA Podcast. Once we get a definite guest, I'll be posting that up immediately. Follow us on Twitter. Like I mentioned before, our website is themmapodcast.com. You have anything about the podcast you want to throw in before we lead them out?
You talking to me, big dog?
I'm talking to you, little guy.
Not at all. Have a spectacular day.
Have a spectacular day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. You know where to be. And until then, we gone.
We gone.